Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Just looking at my Nightscape Images 2024 calendar and loving this calendar. There's heaps of them going out the door, so if you'd like to order one from me, then please put your order in. You can see the link below in the description. But this video is not about calendars. This video is about this new lens that I've got to test, and it is a Viltrox 28mm f1.8 lens, which is for the native Nikon Z mount. So I've been out testing this lens a fair bit for a while now, and before I show you the results of that test, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the lens itself, maybe compare it to some of the other ones I've got here. Firstly, I've tested quite a few Viltrox lenses in the past, and every single one of them are really solidly constructed. That's one of the things I love about them. The second thing I love about them is the reasonably compact size. Now, if you have a look at that compared to the closest I've got, which is this Nikon 35mm lens, it's a fair bit smaller than that. And the other lens I've got here is the Nikon 20mm f1.8, and that's a lot bigger. Now, as far as build construction, I think it's fantastic. It's solid metal construction, and it fits really well on the camera body. Little lens hood here, it's not very big, it comes off, but it is quite solid. You can see it there. So if you didn't have the lens hood on, it would be a really tiny, compact lens. Now for me, personally, when I'm shooting nightscape photography, I always leave the lens hoods on. It gives you that little bit more protection from the elements. Things like lens fogging, but not only that, I like lens hoods being on. It's a point of contact if you happen to bump your lens up against something, or God forbid your lens falls off and hits something. It's going to hit that first if it comes down on the front. And you know, I'd prefer to have that on my lens than some sort of filter, glass filter in front. That's just me, but that's how it rolls. By the way, this is an autofocus lens. Now for me, using it for nightscape photography, I'm using it in manual focus, but it does do autofocus, operates well on photos and video, which is fantastic. And now this lens is made for the Nikon Z mount and the Sony E mount. So it's the same lens, different mount, that's about it. And it retails for about $379 US. So I think that's a very competitive price. So all in all, it's a good lens. Now, a lot of people talk about weather sealing in lenses. Now, I don't think this lens is as well weather sealed as, for example, these Nikon lenses are. I can see there's a bit more of a gasket on the back of those. But having said that, I've shot these lenses at night time when there's been very heavy frost and dew. It gets on the lens, I've just wiped it off, never had any problems. Same with my other lenses, different brands. Especially when you're sometimes wrapping a lens warmer around these lenses, it does tend to cover it anyway and stop some of that frost from getting onto the lens. So for me, I've never had an issue with lenses. Now, I'm not going to be out in the rain shooting with this lens. In fact, I'm probably not going to be out in the rain shooting with any of my lenses, so I don't see that as a major issue. Now, like all the previous Viltrox lenses I've tested, this has a variable aperture ring here on the lens itself. Now for me, I pretty much always stick that onto A, which is automatic, and use the inbuilt function on the Nikon Z cameras to adjust the aperture. But it's good that it's there. So what I want to do is show you some images that I shot with this lens on my Nikon Z6 camera, and we'll come back and I'll wrap this video up after that. The first image I'd like to show is this one. It's a single tracked image at f2.8, 60-second shutter speed at ISO 1600. I've done just a slight bit of editing just to show you. I've increased the exposure, I've added a bit of noise reduction to this, and I've enabled profile corrections. Now, if I just click on this before and after, you can see the original shot does show a fair bit of vignetting around the outside. Also, it's a lot darker. So that's all I've really done is adjust for those things. So if I go back, for example, disable profile correction, you can see it adjusts the warping a little bit. Oh, and one other thing that I think I did, yes, I added in the vignetting +5. So that got rid of the amount of vignette. So you can see the vignette around the edge here. This is at f2.8, remember. So by pressing that to +5, I've got rid of that. So that's pretty easy to get rid of, but it is there. And I want to show you some more examples of that in a minute. So let's just have a look on the image. Remember, this is tracked. Zoom in to 100%, and you can see in the center of the image there, it looks pretty good. Pretty nice round stars. And if we go up to the corners, that's where we're going to see any aberrations. And you can see here on the bright stars, yeah, there is a little bit of distortion on those stars. They're not completely round. A little bit of purple fringing there, I can see. Now, that wouldn't be hard to get rid of either. But, you know, this is at 100%. So let's just zoom across the top of the image. Go to the other side. Same again. A little bit of out of round stars, but it's not overly bad compared to a lot of lenses that I've tried before. So when you zoom out and look at the whole image, it looks pretty good. So let's go to this bottom corner and have a look. Yeah, it's pretty much the same. And across to the other side. Yeah. So one good thing about this lens that I'm using, it looks to be exactly the same in all four corners. So it doesn't appear to be decentered or anything like that, which is a problem that sometimes you can encounter with badly manufactured lenses. All right, let's have a look at the end here. I shot a number of frames, and you can see here these have not been edited at all. So this is at f2.8. You can see my settings, 60 seconds, ISO 1600. Once again, this is on a star tracker. So it's the same experience in the corners there. But what I want to show you is the different vignetting that you will get straight out of camera on this. So let's go to this image, which is shot at f1.8. This is a 10-second shutter speed at ISO 3200. So this is not on a tracker. This is just on a tripod. And you can see an enormous amount of vignette around the outside. This is wide open at f1.8. And you got that aberration in the corner, which is even more pronounced at f1.8, which is exactly what I would expect. Let's go to the other side and we'll see the same thing. So we've got the angel wings here. So there's aberration there. Let's go down the bottom. It's there. It's probably, there's not as many stars down there, but it is there. And it's also there in that side. So as before, all four corners are the same. So there's a lot of vignetting. So let's see if I can just get rid of that. Let's just go down to the effects tab and we'll go +5. No, +10. Yeah, that's a bit harder to get rid of in that environment. Let's go up to the profile correction. So interestingly enough, if I enable or disable the profile corrections, it doesn't do anything for the vignette, but it actually shows here in Lightroom, this is the latest version of Lightroom, the Viltrox 28mm f1.8Z. So it is actually listed as a Lightroom model. So that's pretty good. Let's increase the exposure a bit on this and see what we get. Yeah, so it looks a lot better when you do that. Now, you know, it depends whether you think you'll be shooting wide open at f1.8. I'm going to go to the next image here, which is actually shot at f2.2. And you can see this also shows a fair bit of vignette. Let's just copy the settings from the previous shot. So yeah, at f2.2, when you brighten up this image a bit, the vignetting is far less obvious. And the next one I shot here was at f2.8. I've already showed you a few at f2.8, but let's just go to the same settings. And as you can see at f2.8, there's virtually no vignetting at all. That's with some minor adjustments here in the post-crop vignetting, so +5. Now, that one at f1.8, you can see even with that setting, if I go beyond +5 to +10, it doesn't look right. So that's no good. I'm not going to do that. Maybe I could try it at about +7 or something like that and just see what we get. But it's something you can play around with, and I think you can probably get rid of most of it. Now, you know what? For most of the Nightscape images that I shoot, I actually apply a vignette later on in the editing process. So it's not a disaster if you have a little bit more vignette than what you might expect. But you know, most of the time I'm not going to be shooting my lenses wide open at f1.8. This one at f2.2 looks like a happy medium between all of those. So as you can see in the corner, it's pretty good. No noise reduction applied here. Let's just throw a bit of noise reduction in just to give you an idea of what that might look like. So +30 odd in Lightroom. Move across to the other side. Yeah, look, it's not bad. It's actually pretty sharp, considering it's you know, it's near wide open. So I'm pretty happy with the sharpness of this lens. This is another image I shot on the night. Now this is, once again, a tracked image at f2.8, 60 seconds at ISO 1600. And this hardly has any editing at all. Same as before, nice and sharp in the middle. A little bit of aberration in the corners. But you know what? I'm going to show you how this looks now with a bit of editing done. So I took this over into Photoshop directly from this image. So all I did was add plus 70 on the exposure. Nothing else done down here except a little bit of noise reduction. You can see there I've added plus 32 luminance, contrast, plus 50 in color, and I've enabled profile corrections. And once I've done some editing in Photoshop, it looks like this. And you can see it's actually come up really well. Remember, this is just a single exposure, tracked at 60 seconds, f2.8, ISO 1600. I'll show you that full screen to give you an idea of what it actually does look like, and quite nice. Oh, and by the way, this is a non-astro modified. It's a standard Nikon Z6 Mark II camera. Nothing special about the camera itself. So, and I've put this into Photoshop. I've used Star Exterminator to remove the stars. I've done some editing on the nebulosity of the Milky Way. Then I've put the stars back in to the frame. And of course, when you do that, you get a very nice sharp image. And you can see that any of those aberrations I originally had in the corner are certainly not showing up anywhere near as badly now as they were. They're still there, as you can see, but I have to zoom into 100% to really see them as far as that goes. And the rest of the image is beautiful. So one thing I will say about these images is when it comes down to aberration, sometimes the editing makes a difference to how visible they become later on. So here's another one I shot. Now this is a 3-shot vertical panorama. So you can see this is the first of them. Then I shot this one. So it's just moving the camera straight up. And this is also on a star tracker. So these are tracked images. And one of the reasons I wanted to show you tracked images was just to make sure we didn't get star trailing, which confuses the issue a little bit. So I've got 3 shots, and these are edited pretty much the same as the others. A little bit of noise reduction, profile corrections, and you can see I've added some exposure, dropped the highlights, added some whites, a little bit of dehaze, but not much, just plus 11. And I've sent those over to Photoshop, blended the 3 together, done my normal editing, and this is the result that I got. So we now have, this is a 3-shot Viltrox. Lots of overlap, and that's why the image is a little bit squarer than you would expect. But if you have a look at this image in a full screen mode, it's very nice. Very nice indeed. Exactly the same editing techniques that I use for all my images, and you can see those stars are beautiful, nice and sharp, clear, clean, nebulosity's good. Up in the corners, you can see they look better, I think, as a panorama because you're spreading the pixels even further along. There's more pixels, I suppose. And look at that. It's pretty round, even in the corners. There is a little bit, you can see a little bit of aberration there, but look, it's certainly nothing to worry about. And I certainly wouldn't be worried about this at all. So yeah, I think these images look fantastic. So this is the Viltrox 28mm f1.8 shot at f2.8, and I nearly always do that anyway on most of my lenses. The only time I would open up wider than f2.8 is if it's a really, really dark location and I need to suck in more light. When I'm on a star tracker, that's pretty rare. Foregrounds, I might do it, but you're not going to have problems with coma on stars on foregrounds. But the vignette is the biggest problem that I'm seeing in this lens. Now this is another image I want to show you, which is actually a, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shot panorama. Now I shot it in portrait orientation, and you can see the original images here. That's what they look like. These are tracked at 60 seconds, f2.8, ISO 1600. Standard settings, you can see that. Not much editing, just the same as what I showed you on the other images. Now, one of the problems I encountered here was a problem with my tracker. So if you look at this image, for example, it's tracking quite nicely. That's in the corner. That's what I expected. Let's go to the next one, and that's good too. Let's go to the next one, and I think this one is good. So there's 3 images are good so far. Let's go to the 4th image, And this one, I think, you can see there's star trailing. That has nothing to do with anything except the tracker suddenly decided it didn't want to track properly. I was using the Benro Polaris, and you can see here, for some reason, I don't know why, it created star trails. Let's look at, no, that's it. So there's only 4 shots. So the last of those. Now let's have a look at the final image once I blended and edited these together. And I'm going to take you right in here and show you exactly what this looks like. So it's pretty good on that side, but when I move over to the other side, you can see the star trailing appeared here. So that's where that last image began trailing. And what I did, I've actually cropped this image. So I'm going to show you what it looks like uncropped. So let's just go to the crop tool. You can see here, this is what the original looked like. Remember, this is after editing, okay? So if I zoom into this top corner, you can see severe star trailing. Nothing to do with the lens, it's all to do with the tracking inaccuracy on that side of the frame. So when I move over towards the middle, the tracking's good. So that's just one of the frustrations, and I don't know why it did it. Who knows? It's the Benro Polaris. It has a mind of its own. It will do these things sometimes. It's really good on this side, no good on that side. Even still, when you look at it as a whole image, you can't even see that tracking inaccuracy. So the lens itself performed quite well. So what I did, I just cropped it back to about a standard aspect ratio, 3:2 in a vertical, looks like a portrait orientation. That's what I did for that image, in essence, to get rid of this panel, which was that last shot. So if you take that into account, the image itself looks great. So once again, this is a 4-shot panorama, edited in Lightroom and Photoshop. And yeah, I can't fault this lens. It looks fantastic when you do panoramas as well. So I took the lens out another night, and this is in my backyard directly over my house. This is Bortle 4 sky, so it's nowhere near as dark as the previous time I took the lens out. But you can see here I've used the tracker again. I've shot at 60 seconds at f2.8. This one's at ISO 1250, and that's because of the ambient light levels. I lowered that a little bit. Lots of aeroplanes going through here. Forget about that. And the image looks pretty good, nice and sharp in the middle. If I go to the edges, once again, you can see pretty similar result, and I'd say that's a good result. Now, remember, I'm using a tracker here to demonstrate to you. I want to make it certain that the lens performance is not affected by star trailing because the exposure is too long. So by putting my lens on a tracker, I alleviate the star trailing issue. So that's really good. Happy with that. Let's have a look at this. I actually went to 2 minutes after that. And this is also at f2.8, 120 seconds at ISO 800. Same composition, haven't moved the camera at all. And this is good. Looks good. This is good tracking. Now this is also on the Benro Polaris star tracker. And you can see the stars look great. Look really good. This is just a single exposure, a little bit of elongation in the corners, but I'm happy with it. I'm very happy. Remember, this is a Viltrox lens. This is not a genuine Nikon lens, it's a Viltrox lens. So let's go to another exposure. I shot this one, again, exactly the same tripod position, but this one is 240 seconds. So what's that, 4 minutes? If my maths is right. It's at ISO 400. Let's see how we go with this one. So if I zoom into the center, I think you can begin to see a little bit of star trailing there. Once again, that's not a problem with the lens, that's the tracking, but still pretty good. Let's go up to the corner. Doesn't look too bad up there, does it? So you'd have to say that's a pretty good performance in a Bortle 4 sky. The vignetting isn't an issue here. You can see the star trailing here a little bit more exaggerated. It's probably a bit darker up in that corner of the sky. 4-minute shutter speed, so it's not the lens doing that, it's the inaccuracy of the tracker. But overall, that's a good image too. So this is in a brighter sky, and you can see the effect that that has on the image. But overall, I think the lens has performed really, really well here. So right now I'd like to show you some images I've shot using the Viltrox 28mm f1.8 lens. I've got a foreground here, single shot. This is a bit of moonlight in the sky which helped illuminate the foreground, but it's just one single exposure, one single tracked exposure for the background. And you can see this is blended here. It looks fantastic. I cannot say that this lens is any worse than an equivalent Nikon lens. Now, the closest I have is a Nikon 35mm f1.8, and I think this looks every bit as good as that lens would. Let's have a look at another one. This is a gorgeous scene over the top of this dam. The moon was a bit higher in the sky at this stage when I took the foreground, so I took the foreground after the tracked sky in this particular shot, because when I took the sky image, the moon hadn't yet risen. So I had to wait for the moon to rise, which it did, and eventually by the time I got around to it, I was probably having a cup of tea and a rum ball or something. The moon's pretty bright and it looks very well lit. So, but again, I'm very impressed with the performance of this lens. I think it looks fantastic in this particular example. And I've got another one here I want to show you. This is a Panorama. So there's a few more shots in this, but not, it's 3 shots of the sky, but a lot of overlap, so that's why it doesn't really look like a panorama, but a beautiful image. Again, moonlit foreground, so there's no light painting or anything like that applied to this. It's just natural moonlight, but it is a gorgeous image, and I love the way that this lens has, there's not very much distortion. That's one of the things I like about using a little bit longer focal length lens. So I think the 28mm lens, the Viltrox f1.8, on the Nikon Z mount, yeah, it's good. I actually really like it. So the folks at Viltrox are doing a fantastic job with their lenses. Bottom line, would I recommend this lens for nightscape photography? It's a big yes. Absolutely I would. And the people who would want to buy this lens are those who are probably not wanting to spend as much as they may do on the genuine Nikon Z version. And as you can see in the results that I've gotten from this lens, it's really hard to see the difference once you do the processing in Lightroom, Photoshop, etc. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate you coming to have a look at what I'm doing with the Viltrox lens. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video, and until then, you have a fantastic week. I'll see you then.